Why does the United States, a country that prides itself on democracy and justice, maintain an unwavering alliance with Israel? What motivates this allegiance, and does it truly benefit the American people? These are questions that stir debate in living rooms, academic halls, and geopolitical forums alike. In this video, we're diving deep into history, politics, religion, and some eyebrow-raising conspiracies to explore the U.S.-Israel relationship and whether it really makes sense. To understand today's reality, we must rewind to the late 19th century. The Zionist movement, spearheaded by figures like Theodor Herzl, aimed to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Though the movement gained traction in Europe, its influence crossed the Atlantic, appealing to American Christian Zionists who saw the return of Jews to the Holy Land as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Fast forward to 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, endorsing a Jewish homeland in Palestine. While the U.S. wasn't directly involved, the declaration laid the groundwork for international support for Israel. The interwar period saw increasing advocacy for a Jewish state, especially as anti-Semitism spread across Europe. Then came World War II and the Holocaust, which shifted global sympathies profoundly. The sheer scale of Nazi atrocities galvanized support for a Jewish homeland, culminating in the establishment of Israel in 1948. But was this purely a moral decision? Some suggest that Western nations, including the U.S., saw the establishment of Israel as a way to resolve the Jewish problem by relocating displaced Jews, essentially passing the responsibility to the Middle East. The Middle East emerged as a pivotal chessboard in the Cold War. With the Soviet Union extending influence in Arab nations, the U.S. sought a reliable ally in the region. Israel, strategically positioned and militarily adept, became a natural partner and an extension of U.S. interest in countering Soviet influence. During the 1956 Suez Crisis, the U.S. began to cautiously support Israel as it navigated its role in a complex regional power dynamic. By the 1967 Six-Day War, Israel's military dominance demonstrated its strategic value, cementing its role as a U.S. ally against Soviet-aligned Arab states. These events marked the beginning of significant U.S. military aid to Israel, ensuring its qualitative military edge over its neighbors. While these alliances made sense during the Cold War, their persistence in today's geopolitical climate raises questions. Does the historical partnership continue out of habit, or are there deeper interests at play? Let's not overlook the powerful role of religion and culture. Many evangelical Christians in the U.S. believe in the prophetic importance of Israel's existence, tying it to the second coming of Christ. This belief has led to unwavering support from certain political factions. But here's the twist. If this alliance is partly rooted in religious prophecy, how does that align with the secular nature of U.S. governance? Moreover, does mixing religion with foreign policy lead to biased decision-making? Additionally, Jewish American communities have historically advocated for strong U.S.-Israel ties, leveraging cultural connections and political influence. Yet not all Jewish Americans support Israeli policies, especially regarding Palestine. This diversity within the community complicates the narrative. Now let's address a less discussed topic: the role of U.S. government officials with dual citizenship or close ties to Israel. Critics often question whether such affiliations influence policymaking in ways that prioritize Israeli interests over American ones. For example, figures like Rahm Emanuel, who served as White House Chief of Staff, have faced scrutiny for their ties to Israel. Reports indicate that he volunteered with the Israeli Defense Forces during the Gulf War. Similarly, Michael Oren, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., held dual citizenship until relinquishing his U.S. citizenship to serve as an ambassador. These cases illustrate how dual ties might raise questions about priorities. Some speculate that this dual loyalty, or even the perception of it, could skew policy. There are allegations, for instance, that key legislative actions, such as the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital, were heavily influenced by individuals with strong pro-Israel leanings. Critics argue that such decisions may not align with broader U.S. interests. Furthermore, a 2018 report highlighted that nearly 30 U.S. lawmakers had attended AIPAC conferences or visited Israel through programs funded by pro-Israel organizations. This level of engagement raises concerns about whether these connections might unintentionally overshadow U.S.-centric priorities in foreign policy. The question is, can we fully trust policymakers to serve U.S. interests when their loyalties might be divided? Or is this simply a case of ethnic and cultural connections being misinterpreted as conflicts of interest? The U.S. provides Israel with billions of dollars in military aid annually. In fact, Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. foreign aid since World War II. But what does America get in return? Supporters argue that Israel's advanced military technology and intelligence capabilities benefit U.S. security. For example, Israeli-developed drones, cybersecurity systems, and missile defense technologies have been adopted by the U.S. military. Joint military exercises also allow both nations to sharpen their defense strategies, with the U.S. benefiting from Israel's experience in asymmetric warfare. Beyond military cooperation, the U.S. and Israel share strong economic ties. The U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement, signed in 1985, was the first such agreement the U.S. established with any country. This agreement boosted trade between the two nations, with bilateral goods trade exceeding $40 billion annually in recent years. Key sectors include technology, agriculture, and pharmaceuticals. Moreover, U.S. companies often collaborate with Israeli tech firms, particularly in the cybersecurity and innovation sectors. Companies like Intel and Google have significant research and development centers in Israel, highlighting the mutual economic benefits of this partnership. However, skeptics counter that this aid fuels ongoing conflicts in the region, putting American lives and resources at risk. Some argue that the heavy investment in Israel creates an unequal dependency. While the U.S. provides financial and military aid, Israel often makes unilateral decisions, such as controversial settlement expansions, which complicate U.S. diplomacy in the region. Does this dynamic make the U.S. a benefactor or a pawn? And here's where conspiracy theories kick in. Some claim that the U.S.-Israel alliance is less about mutual benefit and more about the influence of lobbying groups like AIPAC, American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Is it democracy or dollars driving this relationship? A key moment in U.S.-Israel relations was the 1967 Six-Day War, during which Israel's military dominance solidified its status as a regional power. The U.S. doubled down on its support, viewing Israel as an essential ally against Soviet-aligned Arab nations. The 1981 bombing of Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor is another example. Israel acted unilaterally, claiming it was a preemptive strike to prevent nuclear proliferation. While the U.S. officially condemned the act, many argue it quietly supported Israel's aggressive stance. Another major event was the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war, where the U.S. provided diplomatic and military support despite international criticism of Israel's actions. These flashpoints raise questions. Is the U.S. enabling a partner or an aggressor? And how do these actions align with the broader goal of peace in the Middle East? In today's world, the U.S.-Israel alliance extends far beyond military aid. It encompasses economic partnerships, cultural exchanges, and shared technological advancements. Yet this relationship isn't without costs. The U.S.'s staunch support for Israel often isolates it on the global stage, straining relationships with Arab and Muslim-majority countries. Take the Israel-Palestine conflict, for example. Critics argue that U.S. involvement in peace negotiations has often been skewed in favor of Israel, undermining its credibility as a neutral mediator. For instance, the Oslo Accords of the 1990s, hailed as a step toward peace, saw significant U.S. influence, but failed to address critical issues like settlements and the right of return for Palestinians. Many analysts contend that the U.S. leaned heavily toward Israel's demands, leaving Palestinians with few concessions. More recently, the U.S. decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem in 2018 sent shockwaves through the international community, effectively undermining decades of negotiations over the city's status. While this move was celebrated by Israeli leaders, it further alienated Palestinian negotiators and eroded trust in the U.S. as a fair broker. These actions raise questions. Is the U.S. genuinely working toward a two-state solution, or is its role more about maintaining the status quo that benefits Israel? And if the latter, what are the broader implications for regional stability and America's reputation in the global arena? Lobbying groups like AIPAC wield considerable influence in shaping U.S. foreign policy. Their They're masters of persuasion, ensuring that pro-Israel policies remain a bipartisan priority. For example, AIPAC's lobbying efforts have resulted in Congress approving billions in military aid packages to Israel annually. Additionally, they've successfully lobbied against measures critical of Israeli settlement expansions, illustrating their ability to shape policy. Similarly, media portrayal of the U.S.-Israel relationship often skews toward support, rarely questioning the long-term implications. For instance, coverage of conflicts like the Gaza wars frequently emphasizes Israel's right to self-defense, while downplaying Palestinian casualties or broader criticisms of Israeli policies. This framing can create a narrative that discourages deeper scrutiny from the public. Could this be part of a larger agenda to keep the public complacent? Or is it simply the result of disproportionate influence from powerful lobbying in media entities? Let's venture into the realm of conspiracy. Some believe that the U.S.-Israel alliance is part of a broader plan to control Middle Eastern resources and maintain global dominance. For instance, critics often point to the U.S. involvement in securing oil pipelines and trade routes in the region, aligning with Israeli interests to maintain strategic control. One often cited example is the alleged collaboration during the 1956 Suez Crisis, where both nations, alongside the UK and France, were accused of conspiring to undermine Egypt's control of the Suez Canal. While the operation ultimately failed diplomatically, it highlighted shared interests that some claim go beyond mutual benefit and into the realm of orchestrated dominance. Others suggest that Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, wields covert influence over U.S. policies. There are also claims that financial elites with ties to both nations orchestrate this relationship for economic gain. While these theories lack concrete proof, they provoke critical thinking. Are we seeing the whole picture, or just the one they want us to see? As we examine this alliance, we must grapple with ethical questions. Does U.S. support for Israel's policies align with American values of freedom and justice? Or is it a betrayal of these ideals? From the displacement of Palestinians to ongoing conflicts, the consequences of this partnership are far-reaching. Some argue that the U.S. prioritizes Israel at the expense of its own interests. For example, the billions spent on military aid could arguably address domestic issues like healthcare, education, or infrastructure. So why does this alliance endure? So why does the U.S. back Israel? Is it shared values, strategic interests, or something more sinister? As we've seen, the answer lies at the intersection of history, politics, religion, and economics, with a healthy dose of skepticism. Are alliances like this truly in the best interest of the American people? Or are they remnants of a past we're unwilling to question? Drop your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the untold stories of history. Until next time, stay curious and question everything.